What's growing on, gardeners? On today's video, I'm going to show you how to plant the lowest maintenance garden there is. This type of gardening requires no insect pollinators, no active irrigation, and is virtually pest-free. This is truly as close to gardening on autopilot that there is.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
The techniques outlined in this video can be applied to hundreds of different garden vegetables at any time of the year. I'm going to specifically show you how to sow a near zero maintenance summer garden because summer conditions are the hardest to deal with the heat, humidity, pests, and irrigation needs. So if you can do this in the summer, you can do this any time of the year pretty easily. Also, for any of the products that I feature throughout this video, I'll make things easy for you by placing direct links down in the video description for your convenience if you want to find them and use them on your own. The first thing you want to do is set yourself up for success using the principles of crop rotation to your advantage. The last thing I had growing in this raised garden bed that you see right here are brassicas, mostly broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and collard greens. And what is going in this bed in this video are going to be tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and squash. So they are all in completely different families than what was growing in here previously, and they don't have a whole lot of disease overlap. You see, anytime you grow something disease prone in your soil, like brassicas, well, a certain amount of pest eggs from the insects that they attract and other types of fungal diseases are going to be attracted to those plants, and they're going to accumulate in the soil. So there's going to be some amount of insect pest eggs and fungal diseases that attach to brassicas in the soil right now. So we wouldn't want to go right ahead and plant another wave of brassicas in there because you'll have a high likelihood that things are going to hatch or become active in the soil that are going to attack those plants. We want to plant things unrelated to brassicas, so that's why we are going to plant mostly nightshades and cucurbits in here. It's not a 100% guarantee that you won't have any problems, and it's entirely possible that some pests like worms and caterpillars that like to eat your cabbage will also attack your tomato plants, but it does lessen the possibility of a problem, and at the very least it helps drag out a low pest or pest-free period later into the season than they would otherwise had you just sown something very closely related in the same bed. That's why crop rotation is so advantageous in a garden. The second thing you want to do is prepare your garden soil in advance if you have the time. Now, I understand if you're watching this video right now and you need to plant things out in your garden immediately, you may not have the luxury of doing this. But if you have a month or two or longer in between your different plantings of different crops, I recommend you pre-amend your soil. That way it is ready and raring to go for you to put new transplants or direct sow seeds into your garden. So about 5 or 6 weeks ago, when I pulled all of my old brassicas out of here, I amended this garden soil with about 2 inches of compost, and then I placed this tarp on top of it with a bunch of bricks to hold it down. And the reason why I placed this tarp on top is twofold. Number one, the tarp is actually going to attract the heat of the sun and hold it in and kind of bake that soil, because I'm assuming that in that soil right now there's going to be pest eggs and there's also going to be weed seeds and fungal diseases that have accumulated over the time that all my brassicas were growing in this bed. So that tarp is going to heat up the soil and it's going to help kill off some of those weed seeds, fungal diseases, and insect pest eggs. Will it kill all of them? No, but it will kill more than if you didn't already cover things with a tarp from the get-go. And the other thing this tarp is going to do is it's going to accelerate the breakdown of the compost that I added to the soil because of that residual heat element. So when I added 3 bags of cow manure compost to this bed, that cow manure compost probably wasn't 100% fully composted and ready to go. It still had a little bit of a raw manure component to it. So because I placed it down, since it has been sitting underneath this tarp for over a month, it has been heating up and breaking down that entire time, and all of those nutrients have been leaching into that soil. So because I prepped the bed from the get-go, not only is it going to have less issues with fungal diseases, less pest eggs, and less weed seeds, but all of those nutrients have been breaking down and trickle feeding the soil the entire time, so I have more nutrients in that soil for the plants I'm going to put in on this video. The next thing you want to do is select species of plants that do not need pollination from animals in order to maintain and ripen their fruits to maturity. So two examples of that are peppers and tomatoes. It's a common misconception that peppers and tomatoes are pollinated by bees and other pollinator insects. Yes, it is true that bees and pollinator insects can pollinate your peppers and your tomatoes, but in fact, most pepper and tomato flowers are wind pollinated because each individual flower houses both the male and female sex organs. So all you need for pollination of your tomato and pepper flowers is a breeze and to vibrate the plant. That will shake the male pollen all around the female parts of that same enclosed flower and spread that pollen. And as long as it's underneath 90 degrees and you don't have severe humidity and it's not very wet out, that pollen will properly fertilize that flower and you will make a fruit that will maintain all the way to maturity. So if you really want to up your pollination game, one of the best way to do that is to simply go to your plants and shake them when they're full of flowers, or you can take a vibrating electric toothbrush and touch each flower for 1 to 2 seconds, or take a leaf blower on low, your lowest possible setting, and just blow the plants to simulate the wind, and you will get great pollination. The other things that we are going to plant in this bed specifically are going to be cucumbers and zucchini. And this is where the rules break, because your cucumbers and zucchini are part of the cucurbit family. They have separate male and female flowers. So the only way that you will get mature cucumber and zucchini fruits is if you have pollinator insects transfer the pollen from the male flower to the female flower. But here is a loophole for what I'm doing right here. I am growing naturally parthenocarpic varieties of cucumbers and zucchini. So this is a variety called H19 Little Leaf. It only makes female flowers and it does not require pollination to hold the fruit. So you can grow these under protection, under cover, or in a greenhouse, or indoors year-round, and they will produce absurd amounts of fruit. You can also grow other parthenocarpic varieties. There's dozens of different parthenocarpic varieties of cucumbers like Merlin, Party Time, Socrates, Isnik, Crispy Crunchy, Diamant. There's so many. I've made so many videos on them in the past. I have also discovered a variety of zucchini called Dunja, and it is one of the few naturally parthenocarpic varieties of zucchini. Most zucchini you need to have cross-pollination. Most zucchini needs to be pollinated by insects or manually by hand, but this is one of the few varieties that is partially parthenocarpic, and you can grow it in a greenhouse with some success, and you'll get fruits even under cover. Then the other things I'm going to put in this bed right here are basil plants. And since we eat the leaves of the basil plant, there's no need for any kind of pollination in order to enjoy the food from the basil plant. They can grow anywhere, indoors, outdoors, under cover. No need for any pollinators at all. Now, if you're watching this video and you don't want to plant tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, and peppers, or it's a different time of year, there are still all kinds of things that you can plant that don't require pollination, like your peas or string beans or lima beans, for example. They are a flowering legume, but they're also wind pollinated, so you don't need any visits from pollinators to get them to hold fruit. Of course, you can grow any kind of root crop like carrots or beets or turnips or parsnips or rutabagas. Since you're eating the root of that plant, there's no need to have any kind of pollination. You can grow any leafy greens like your brassicas, your cabbage, your cauliflower, broccoli. You can grow your lettuces. You can grow any of your herbs since you're eating the greenery of the plants. You can grow radishes. You can grow onions. You can grow potatoes since we eat the tuber of that plant. There's very few things in our annual vegetable garden that actually require cross-pollination in order to get them to hold fruit. Your cucumber and zucchini are two of those few things that do, so that's why we have the solution of these partially parthenocarpic varieties where we can keep them under cover. Which which brings me to my next point. Step number 4, we are going to grow all of these plants underneath insect netting. That way we don't have to worry about any insect pests for the most part. And that is why it's so important that we select plants that don't need insect pollination to hold the fruit. We're not going to have any bees or other pollinator insects underneath the insect netting, so we want to make sure either they don't require pollination at all or the wind does the work for us. Otherwise, we're going to have to periodically go underneath the insect netting and we're going to have to manually hand pollinate the plants. Now, I have 2 different types of insect netting that you can choose from. One is a black insect netting, and this black insect netting actually functions as a 20 to 30% shade cloth, in addition to being a fine mesh to keep insects out of your raised bed garden. This one is a white insect netting, which effectively provides 0 or near 0 sun protection. So what you want to use will differ based on the time of the year. It's the beginning of August right now. It's still blazingly hot here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. So I'm going to start the plants underneath the black insect netting for about 2 to 3 weeks. Then once we reach the end of August and the heat starts dying down and the sun gets weaker, we are going to switch to the white insect netting. If you're watching this at any time other than summer, you're probably going to want the plain white insect netting. This is a great bridge product here if you want a combo insect netting and shade cloth. Regardless what you choose, I will place links to both down in the video description for your convenience. Step number 5 is something that you simply cannot overlook, and that is, if you are growing from transplant, carefully check your plants over for any insect egg deposits, especially underneath the undersides of your leaves, because insects love laying eggs underneath your leaves, especially things like squash bugs, vine borers, stink bugs, and leaf-footed bugs. Because we are starting our plants underneath insect netting, if you make a mistake and you have insect eggs that are already underneath the leaves and they hatch underneath the insect netting, well, now you're creating a perfectly protected environment where those insects can flourish, and they'll just demolish your plants because they will be growing and multiplying without any predatory insects to help control the population. So even if you plant underneath insect netting, you still have to periodically check your plants to make sure that no insects slipped under there, or that you accidentally didn't plant plants with some hidden eggs somewhere, or you could just have eggs sitting in the garden soil that are going to naturally hatch. That's why this method isn't 100% bulletproof. It's like 95% bulletproof. There is still some insect pressure because insects can still slip past the defenses, or you just have to assume that there are some insect pest eggs in that soil, and if they hatch, you will have a nightmare on your hands. So that's why you still have to check for insects underneath the insect netting fairly regularly, and if you do have a problem, you'll have to spray under there to control the problem. There are lots of natural and organic remedies like pyrethrin, spinosad, and insecticidal soap. So those are some tools that you can use that are very low risk if you have some kind of insect outbreak underneath the insect netting. So now I'm going to remove the bricks and the tarp that I have on top of the raised bed, and we're going to take a look at the soil that's ready to plant underneath. And because I had the foresight to cover this raised garden bed with that tarp beforehand, I have literally 0 weed seed germination. That's because most weed seeds struggle to germinate in the absence of light, and even if they do, they will mostly and typically suffocate underneath the tarp. The next thing we want to do is to lay out our garden bed as intelligently as possible. And I strongly recommend that you take the plants and you place them where you want to go before you start digging holes. And in the back row right here, I'm going to put my zucchini plants because these are by far going to need the most room to sprawl out with their very large leaves. That's why they're isolated to the back there. Then I have this cucumber plant. I am specifically growing a dwarf cucumber plant in this raised garden bed. I have that same cucumber that's growing here. This is a very old plant that's 3 months old, and that is as big as it gets. We will have frost before then, so it's never going to get that large. So I specifically chose a compact variety that I'm going to isolate in the back here. Then in the center of the raised garden bed, I'm going to put my tomato plants, and they are all determinate varieties, so they are going to top out probably at only about 4 feet tall, and I'm planting them in the center because that is where the cover to my raised garden bed will be the highest, and I'm giving them a very generous 2-foot spacing all around. That way they can kind of grow and stretch their legs. In each of the corners, I'm putting a basil plant. I have a basil plant that's green right there, and I have a basil plant that's purple right here. They will need the least amount of space to grow. And then staggered in between the tomato plants, I have pepper plants. I have 2 sweet peppers and I have 2 hot peppers. So we don't want to overcrowd our bed, and this is going to fill in very nicely. It's really important that you give all of these plants enough room to stretch their legs. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to prepare our fertilizers, and I'm going to use 2 different types of fertilizers: granular organic fertilizers and water-soluble fertilizers. The granular organics is the custom blend that I always make, which is a blend of 3 parts all-purpose organic fertilizer around a 555 NPK, 1 part bone meal and 1 part azomite, and then I mix it in one of these 5-gallon buckets and blend it all together, and I apply it in the planting holes and also fertilize my plants about every 2 weeks, twice a month, with a top dressing, a sprinkle around the root area of each individual plant. I've showed you how to make this in the past. I'll link to a video both above and down in the video description that shows you how to do that, and I'll link to the products in the video description for your convenience as well. After the plants are planted, we are then going to mix water-soluble fertilizers in a watering can, and we are going to apply them to the root area of the plant because that's going to help them fend off transplant shock and give them a boost, because we are entering late summer right now. I want to push these plants and get them to grow quickly into the fall for a harvest. And in that watering can, I always add about 2 to 3 tablespoons per gallon of Alaska fish fertilizer, and then I make my own blend of water-soluble fertilizer. This is a blend of about 3 parts 20-20-20 water-soluble fertilizer and 1 part azomite. So I like to add this to a watering can at a concentration of 1 tablespoon per gallon. Again, that is something that I've showed you how to make in the past. I'll link to a video both above and down in the video description that will show you how to do that. Now I'm going to show you how to transplant these plants, and I'm going to do this with 2 different examples. The first with tomatoes and the second with everything else. And the reason why tomatoes are special is because they have the unique ability to produce roots all up and down the stems. So if you bury the stem a few inches, you can theoretically over time get a larger root system than if you just plant the root ball. So because of that, I am going to plant my tomatoes extra deep. Ooh, wow, look at that. I have an old cabbage root ball there that hasn't really broken down very much. Wow, that was quite the root system right there. So we are going to dig this hole extra deep. And this is why it's so nice to have deep raised beds when you're planting things with large root systems like tomatoes or squash plants or watermelons. So we're going to place that root ball down there and estimate, look, that's going to bury about half that stem. That is just perfect. So we are going to put about 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of our organic all-purpose fertilizer in that planting hole. Then we are going to turn our plant over, squeeze the bottom of the container, and that is going to expose the root ball. And that is just what we want to see. We want to see nice, bright, healthy, white or off-white colored roots, but they aren't spiraling all over the root ball. That would indicate that they were in those containers too long, and you're starting to get root bound because our plants are outgrowing the containers. Now we're going to take the soil and we are going to spread that around the bottom of our tomato plant. We're going to tap it down very well to make sure we get all the air out of the soil. And then we're going to take about another tablespoon of the organic fertilizer as a top dressing and then bury that around the tomato plant. And last but not least, we are going to place our tag so we don't forget what variety of tomato that is. That is a very important step. Do not skip it. For our peppers, squash, cucumbers, and basil, we are only going to plant the root ball flush with the soil because we don't really get any benefit from rooting up along the stems. Yes, it is true that your zucchini, your cucumbers, and your peppers can grow small roots at the nodes where there is a leaf junction. here, they can make a few surface roots, so if you bury them deeply, you may get a few extra roots, but generally speaking, there's really no advantage to that, and it may actually slow them down in the beginning, and we are dealing with a limited amount of time left in our growing season. So I see no real advantage to planting those plants deep from the get-go. The only real advantage I could see is if your zucchini is getting attacked by vine borers or something like that, and then you bury some of that stem after you kill the vine borers with BT or spinosad or something, and hope that you can get them to recover by rooting along the stem. There's a little pro tip right there. Okay, so now we have this plant perfectly flush. We're going to put another 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of our organic all-purpose fertilizer. We're going to gently squeeze the bottom of that container. This one's really stuck on there. This plant is really happy. Look at that intense root system right there. But it's still not root bound. There's no spiraling, so we're very good. That's a very healthy root system. Again, we're going to backfill the planting hole, press it down to make sure we get all of the air pockets out. Really smack that soil down. And then we are going to, again, top dress with 1 tablespoon of organic all-purpose fertilizer. Cover that up with a little bit of soil to help facilitate decomposition. And we are going to place our plant tag so we know what it is. Then we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing to every other plant in this bed. Okay, now all of my plants have been transplanted and it's time to water them in with water-soluble fertilizer. But before I do that, I'm going to water around each plant individually with a garden hose first. And that is because this soil has been covered by a tarp for over a month, so it is very dry. And dry soil is hydrophobic. So if I just mix my fertilizer in a watering can and I water around each plant, the soil isn't going to easily accept that water. It's going to run off and I'm going to be wasting all of that expensive fertilizer. If you are planting in a garden bed that has been exposed to the elements and you recently got rain and your soil is moist, you can skip this step. But if your soil is fairly dry, I strongly recommend you water around each plant first so the soil becomes well acclimated to accepting the water, and then when we add the watering can full of water, it absorbs rapidly into the soil. Now we are going to mix our water-soluble fertilizers in our watering cans, and these are all 1.5 gallon watering cans, so keep that in mind. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to shake up our fish fertilizer, and we are going to add this at a rate of 2 to 3 tablespoons per gallon. So that means that each watering can will get about 3 to 4 tablespoons. It doesn't have to be perfect, you can just eyeball it. And then we're going to take our water-soluble fertilizer blend and mix that at a rate of 1 tablespoon per gallon. So again, each one is going to get a 1.5 tablespoon scoop. And then after your water-soluble fertilizers have been added, it is critical that you mix things very well. These fertilizers have to be completely dissolved in the watering can before you apply them. Then we will go and we will apply them to the root area of the plant. You will be able to feed about 3 to 6 plants per gallon of water depending on the size of the plant, where larger plants will need more fertilizer than smaller plants. Now, the next step is not mandatory, but it is very important to do if you want to have a truly autopilot garden, and that is to install drip irrigation to your garden beds. A lot of gardeners are resistant to install drip irrigation because they think it is complicated, time-consuming, and expensive, but the exact opposite is true. What is complicated, time-consuming, and expensive is overhead watering your garden, because it is very time-consuming, very inefficient, and it will shorten the life of your plants in most instances. That's because when you overhead water, you do not get deep penetration of water into the soil, and you're also spreading that water over a very wide surface area, which then comes in contact with the sun. So you're shallow watering, it only penetrates 1 inch or 2 deep, and then all of that soil, which is generally dark, is exposed to the sunlight, which beats on that soil and evaporates a lot of your your overhead irrigation back into the atmosphere. So you're wasting your time and just throwing your money away when you overhead irrigate. In addition, most of your fungal diseases colonize on wet leaves, and the fungal diseases themselves are largely found in the soil. So when you overhead water, you get soil splashing on the undersides of your leaves, which are protected from the sun, and they do not get cleansed from the sun's UV, and then the plants stay wet for a long period of time, and they tend to facilitate colonizing those fungal diseases. So you're spending countless man hours watering, you're largely wasting that water due to evaporation, and you're spreading disease along your garden vegetables, and that's all a no-no. If you run the drip irrigation, you only have to put time and money into things once, and then from there you are doing nothing but saving time and money, because the process becomes automated by simply flicking a switch or turning on a faucet, and everything gets done for you. And because the drip irrigation penetrates at a point source, it penetrates deeply into the soil, so you're watering the plants deeply and you're not wetting the whole area of the soil, so you're getting almost no evaporation. Instead of wasting the water by overhead irrigating, you're actually protecting the water. It's going deep into that soil and not evaporating. So you're going to save a ton of money, and I must save probably 100 to 200 hours every single summer easily by setting up drip irrigation to my garden. Setting up drip irrigation is a piece of cake. It's a fraction of the skill of the simplest Lego set you could possibly build. Over the years, I've made a tutorial on how to install practically every kind of drip irrigation you could ever imagine. I'll link to a playlist both above and down in the video description that will show you every way to install drip irrigation. I'm telling you, it is really cheap and easy to do. It's even borderline a little fun. Now I'm going to show you how to install drip line in this raised garden bed, and this assumes that you have already installed your distribution line to your garden beds. If you haven't, check out one of the tutorials down in the video description. I have a very in-depth tutorial that shows you how to install your distribution line. What I'm going to do is tag onto the distribution line with this really inexpensive drip tape that has emitters every 6 inches installed on it. Once you have your main distribution line run to your garden beds, it couldn't be any easier to install drip irrigation. All we're going to do is take one of these piercing tools and we're going to install it into the drip line. Then we are going to take one of the drip irrigation punch tools. Again, a lot of these things I will link down in the video description below if you're curious in any of these tools. For actually installing a drip irrigation system, I strongly recommend you source everything from a sole manufacturer like Drip Depot. That is the manufacturer I use for all of my drip irrigation. I'll link to my drip irrigation store down in the video description for your convenience as well. Install all your main lines and individual parts and elbows to your beds, sole sourcing it through a single manufacturer. You'll get the best quality and the best price. But things like drip line or garden staples, you can buy them from anyone. So we're going to penetrate into the main distribution hose, and we are simply going to unspool our drip tape. This is drip line rather. And then we're going to use these garden staples to hold it down every few feet, just to make sure that everything stays nice and snug. The one bit of advice I will give you is you can't feed drip line from just one side. You have to plug the other end back into the distribution line as well. Otherwise, you won't get enough pressure at the end of the system. So make sure you do that. Now I'm going to unroll this drip line in my garden bed and stake everything down. And then once I get that all run and connected on the other end, I will test it and make sure that I'm getting good water pressure. All of the drip line has been run, and I've had it turned on, and I've been testing it for about 5 to 10 minutes. And everything is performing exactly the way that I want it to perform. You can see all of that water dripping, targeting near the base of the plants. So now that I know that this system is in fact working properly, we are going to go ahead and mulch our raised bed. It is critically important that we mulch our raised garden beds, because mulching the raised garden bed is going to suppress weeds by both preventing the germination of any weed seeds that already exist on the soil to a degree. It's going to try and prevent any weed seeds that are naturally blowing around in the air from reaching the soil level and germinating. It is going to preserve moisture in our raised garden bed, so we have to irrigate less, and the moisture in our raised garden bed stays at a more consistent level. And it's also going to break down over time and add organic matter and nutrients to our soil while attracting earthworms. This is all very important stuff. Now, what mulch you use is up to you. Any natural mulch will do. Just don't use a dyed mulch, because those are ground up construction products like plywood and pallets and lumber that they artificially dye to make look like real natural wood when it is really just a wood product. Don't use rubber mulch because they're made up of old tires and things like that. Don't use stone mulch because stone mulch does not decompose and add organic matter to your soil. Any natural mulch will do. You can use cypress mulch, pine bark nuggets, pine straw, wheat straw, hay, as long as you're sure it's not contaminated with any herbicide, grass clippings, as long as it doesn't have any weed seeds in it and you don't treat your lawn. You can use wood chips from an arborist. It doesn't really matter as long as it is natural. But what I'm going to recommend we use is cedar mulch. And the reason why I'm going to use cedar mulch is it has a natural pest repellent property. And that is for two reasons that I know of. Number one, cedar oil is a natural insecticide, so it can kill insects. I doubt the mulch is going to actually kill insects. However, the real benefit is the repellent properties. The odor of cedar oil is known to repel insects, and because insects often find your plants via scent or sensing their hormones, because cedar has such a deep and intoxicating aroma, it tends to mask the scents and hormones given off by other plants. So at the very least, because it has such an intense odor, it can actually confuse pests or camouflage your plants. So that is why I'm going to use cedar mulch. It's probably the most insect-resistant mulch out there, at least that I know of. And don't worry, it's not going to repel your earthworms. You'll still get them. So I'm going to apply the cedar mulch in a layer about 2 to 3 inches thick to my raised garden beds, sitting on top of the drip lines now that I know that they are functioning properly. And here is the finished product now that it's been mulched. Look how beautiful that looks, everyone. Isn't that just pretty as a picture? I feel like it should be on the cover of a magazine. I cannot wait to see how much delicious food this raised garden bed produces over the next 6 to 12 weeks. And now the last thing we are going to do is cover our garden bed with the insect netting. And remember, it's early August, the sun is still really rough, so I'm going to use this black insect netting, which has a 20 to 30% shade cloth rating. After the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to take this off and replace it with the regular white shade cloth, because come the end of August, I won't need the shade protection anymore. And to do that, I'm simply going to drape it over this PVC structure that I built over my raised garden bed and clip it down with these 1/2 inch PVC snap clamps. Again, links in the description to all of these different things. If you want to learn how to build a PVC hoop structure over your raised garden beds, it's incredibly easy. I'll link to a video both above and down in the video description that will show you how to do it. All they are is 1/2 inch electrical PVC conduits from the electrical aisle at Lowe's or Home Depot. They're very cheap. You can build one of these in only about 30 minutes. So now I'm going to unravel the insect netting and I'm going to clip it down on the PVC conduits. This right here is the closest thing to an autopilot vegetable garden that we could possibly have, because we took all of the necessary precautions. We covered it with insect netting so we don't have to worry about foreign insects penetrating their way into our garden and attacking our plants. We don't have to worry about pollination from insects because we planted all things that are wind pollinated, parthenocarpic, and don't need pollination, or we eat the leaves so we don't have to worry about a flower being pollinated. We put down cedar mulch so we don't have to worry about weeds, and that will also help repel pests. We even put down drip irrigation, so now our drip irrigation is fully automated. All we have to do is turn on our spigot and it will water it for us, or we can get a fancy irrigation timer, which is only around $25 or $30, and it will automatically water your garden for you. You can go on vacation for a week or two and you don't have to worry about your garden beds drying out. This is truly the easiest way that you can garden. really the only things that we have to worry about is fertilizing the plants every 2 weeks. Eventually these are going to get tall enough that I'm going to have to stake them with some small stakes. So in a week or two, we'll probably have to stake the plants, and then we're just going to have to change out this insect netting from a black one to a white one when things cool down in a few weeks. Other than that, this is as truly low maintenance as it gets. And look at this. Already the insect netting is paying dividends. We got a hefty rain shower this morning, and I came outside to look at my garden, and look what I see right here. A Japanese beetle on there trying to get into my plants, but it can't because of this insect netting. And actually just before that, there was a big old grasshopper on here trying to work its way into my raised garden bed as well. So thankfully our plants are completely protected underneath the insect netting, and also the insect netting helps lower the rate of rainfall as well. So we had a really heavy rainstorm. The insect netting actually insulates the plants from the rain because it doesn't fall from the sky and hit them as hard. So this just provides protection in so many different amazing ways. So if you are looking for a way to garden smarter instead of harder, I strongly recommend you do little tips and tricks like these to increase your productivity, increase the amount of things that you can grow, and reduce your workload while saving money. Doing things like this is how I'm able to keep gardening through the extreme heat of the summer and the extreme cold of the winter. Well, relative extreme cold. We don't get that cold here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, but we still get about 30 to 40 frosts and freezes every single year, which is quite a bit. We deal with cold here. So when we don't want to be outside in the heat or the cold, making our lives easier by automating a process and using physical barriers and planting varieties of plants that are lower maintenance, that is really the key to having success. And you can have more success doing things this way, which will therefore motivate you to plant even more things. And since you're saving all kinds of time and money, you can expand your garden and you can grow twice as many things that you were the year before because you're doing half the work on all of those things. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful and enlightening. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring the notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. Again, for all the products I featured in this video, I placed direct links to all of them down in the video description. For everything else I use in my garden in real life, they are all linked in my Amazon storefront down in the video description. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon storefront link, and you'll see everything I use in real life in my yard and garden. And while you're down there, please consider checking out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support my channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Whew, Dale's dad had a rough day today. I've been editing videos for 11 hours straight, and I just can't do anymore. The sun is almost setting, and Dale and I are finally stretching our legs. Dale's mom took him for a walk in the morning, so he hasn't been shut in all day, but I have, and it has not been any fun. So he went for a morning walk with Mom. Now he's getting an evening walk with Dad, and we still have a couple more hours of work to do, but that's okay, because at least I get to spend a couple hours with the best boy that is being very annoying and sniffing every single little thing in this new area they're clearing out for more low quality plywood houses they're going to put 4 feet from each other, because that's all they build now. Ugh. Not everybody gets to have a backyard anymore, it seems.